What does it take to create something that never existed before? What does it take to challenge the status quo? What does it take to change the world? This is the Swell podcast. We're passionate about the seed of an idea and how it swells into a movement. Take a journey with us as we seek the answers to those three questions through the stories of thought leaders, world builders, game changers, disruptors, and other pleasantly rebellious humans who've ventured out into the unknown on a personal journey to do something novel, innovative, creative, or disruptive. In today's episode, we chat with Matthew Leavitt, the CEO at Pathnet Labs. We kick everything off with a discussion about the movie Rocky, and then ultimately dive pretty deep into his personal journey and story through the field of pathology, and now into his new venture and attempt to digitally disrupt that field through Pathnet Labs. And then, yes, we come back around to tie it all together through, again, Rocky. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast, sign up to our newsletter at theswellpod.com, and get in on the conversation through all of the major socials at theswellpod. Our first season is made in partnership with Kiln. Kiln provides flex office space solutions for teams and individuals. Their all-inclusive set of amenities helps startups, creatives, and entrepreneurs alike get work done. Learn more about Kiln at kiln.co. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoy.
Well, welcome to the Swell podcast, Matt Leavitt.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Josh, and Spencer. You and I go back a long way, so it's fun to hear about what you're doing.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, in fact, I must have told Josh quite a lot about you over the years, especially when we started working together many, like 4 or 5 years ago, and I think you were already on your journey with what you're doing, and we'll get into that in a moment. But you know, we're excited to hear your vision of and how you found it. And I think that would be Josh, do you think that'd be the first key question? Just tell us about this journey and how it began.
Yeah.
Well, first, let me just say, Josh, if you ever have any problems with Spencer, I've got lots of good dirt on him. So, just come to me, and I can help you out there. The problem is he has lots of dirt on me too. So.
Yeah, but I can't use the dirt on you. Like, yeah, definitely. Send me what you have. But yeah, no, that sounds good.
Well, sorry, I couldn't resist, Spencer. What?
Well, hold on, because I can't remember. So how do you guys know each other? Just take me back. Like, where did you go? Where did you guys meet, and how do you guys know each other?
We were crazy teenagers together, and young teenagers, tweeners, really, in Leeds, England.
Okay.
My father's work was there and I lived there for 3 years. And by the time I left, I sounded maybe a little more like Spencer than I do like myself today in terms of accent. But that's been many years ago now. So, but we spent some great times together in Leeds, England, and some fun nights camping in places we probably shouldn't have been camping in, and
well, maybe, who knows, maybe I'll share some stories. We'll see. But I remember, I don't know, I just think, I'm sure you didn't know what you were going to do in your career and where you were going to go with this vision, right? We didn't talk about that when we were 11 or 12 or 13. We got excited about things. I remember watching that Rocky movie in the 80s and getting so excited about it, and like
punching things and exercising afterwards. Yeah.
Unfortunately, punching things and damaging grand pianos and things. But somehow that translated into you being pretty excited about, I don't know, the vision that you're working on now, and there we go. There's my connection. it's not quite the same, but something a bit more meaningful, maybe.
You just connected Rocky and punching things to pathology. Did I get that right? Or
well, the connection is to leave a very stable job and try to go out and do what we're doing does take a certain amount of aggressiveness or assertiveness. Aggressive is maybe not the right word, but yeah, if you're somebody who wants just to maintain stability and you're worried about change, you wouldn't do what we tried to do. And actually, okay, there is a parallel, and maybe we're stretching here, but Rocky is the story of a nobody from the streets of Philadelphia who takes on the world champion. And really, what this story is an unknown pathologist from a small town in southern Utah trying to disrupt a whole field of medicine, which sounds really crazy. But so in some ways, this is that. We certainly haven't achieved it yet. And so whether we get punched out by Apollo Creed and lose, or whether we pull off something remarkable is yet to be seen. But we are trying. So there is an interesting Rocky correlate there. But
I love
who would have known, eh?
That's amazing. Real quick, Matt, can we just have you shift a little bit to your left? I think your left, yeah. Just to
you want to be able to see it, yeah. I'm trying to speak into the microphone, which maybe I can move the microphone over a little bit here too. There we go.
That's
that
perfect.
Way I can, yeah, okay.
So we're definitely going to want to find out like what's taking place on your Rocky journey, right? And what's your moment of like running up the staircase and lifting your hands up in the air. Like I want to know what that moment is for you, or if you've had it yet. But like I think it's a perfect time to then go back into the vision. Like what is your story about? Like what are you on a mission to do out in the world?
Yeah. So I'm a physician first. Why I do this is I care about patients. I want to improve their lives, and that really is the basis of why I do this. My specialty is in surgical and hematologic pathology. And most people don't know what pathology is. They think of autopsies and those kinds of things. But pathology is really the foundation for a lot of our diagnostics. Without pathology, without the laboratory, so many of the coming revolution in medicine, the molecular revolution, the introduction of artificial intelligence into medicine, it couldn't happen outside of the practice of pathology. And so I was practicing at a large, in a large medical system here in Utah. I was the department chair in the laboratory of a large regional hospital, and I had this vision of that this whole field could be transformed if it was done digitally, and if we could utilize the power of computation, and that actually probably started way before I became a doctor, actually. But I could see, 10 years or so ago, I could see a path that could transform this field. And about 7 years ago, I stepped away from a really good job and the security of that job to start a new type of practice, a digital practice. And that was really the beginning of this odyssey.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it seems like a big area. And I'll be completely honest. Before we knew, or when we knew we were gonna interview you, I had to look up pathology. Like I wasn't totally sure
Yeah.
what it was, and And I was like,
We're the guys
well,
in the basement of the hospital, and we're really the consultants to the other physicians. So if you have a lab test drawn by your doctor, or you have a biopsy taken, it's sent off to the pathologists to analyze that. And then the answer doesn't come to the patient directly from the pathologist. The answer comes from their doctor, but the doctor gets that information from the pathologist. So, and that's kind of important to recognize that there's a reason why most pathologists choose this profession. It doesn't usually attract the extroverts. It usually attracts the people that are happy being alone in the basement of a hospital, and they like to do their work. It's a very diligent. I love the culture of pathology, but it tends to be a more introverted, quiet, very conservative group of people. And that's actually important to this story, because we're trying to drive revolutionary change amidst a group of people who really sometimes are a bit change averse.
yeah. Yeah, that is interesting. And I guess I started to get really personally connected when I did start looking into pathology and really understanding more and more about what it was, because I then realized, well, because my wife just recently got a biopsy.
Mhm.
My mom got a biopsy. She's actually, because of that, what they found in the biopsy, which they found out she had skin cancer, and she's actually in surgery today, which is really interesting. And so all of a sudden I became very interested in like the what the actual experience has been for my wife and from my mom as it relates to understanding what's actually going on in their body, and happening to them as a result of whatever virus or infection or whatever it is that's getting to them. And I guess what to bring it back around to you is, even before you had this idea of this digital transformation for pathology, what was it that sparked that desire to go off and do that? Like, you noticed that there was an opportunity for that, but I guess just take me back to that moment when it really hit you that there is a real opportunity here.
Well, let me answer that by relating it to your mother's journey,
Mm.
if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I think it makes it easier. She had a skin biopsy. There was maybe some kind of lesion or a mass there that drew her attention. And when that was taken out through a biopsy, a pathologist analyzed that and determined that the correct treatment for that was surgery. And so here she is today having surgery because of that decision. Most of the world population has access to people who can provide treatment. They have access to some kind of treatment. They have access to surgeons who can cut things out. They have access to people who can provide medical therapy, or even some indigenous herbal therapies. There's people who can provide those therapies almost everywhere. Where there is a shortage in the world's medical care, a massive shortage, is in good diagnostics. And so let's say someone else's mother in a developing country has a mass that, but without the ability to do a biopsy, people would make their best guess. We think that this mass needs to be cut out. But what if it turns out that mass was not what it was in your mother's case, but maybe it was a bug bite, and the patient actually needed some kind of therapy for the poison, or maybe it's a lymphoma, and instead of having it cut out, which would only lead to it popping up in many other places, it needed a medical oncologist, somebody who could give chemotherapy. Without the guidance of the pathologist the people treating these illnesses are driving blind. Not completely blind. There's other things besides pathology that help them to make decisions, but it's really a critically missing element. And I would say for maybe half of the human family, they don't have access. There are some countries where there's only 1 or 2 pathologists in the whole country. So there's a huge global shortage in good diagnostic care. And my awareness of that is really and the ability for, if you could digitize those biopsies, a world expert could look at them anywhere. You know, if you had a way to take an image of that, send it with your cell phone to a pathologist, you could have a world expert looking at a patient's biopsy in sub-Saharan Africa, and provide that critical intelligence, the diagnostic intelligence that is needed to be able to make the right decision for that patient. Right now, we depend on that physical glass getting to the right person. And so you can see, if you could convert that physical piece of glass with that patient's biopsy specimen on it into a digital image that can instantly be anywhere in the world, that can transform medical care for much of the human population. That concept, the ability to be able to provide what I was doing for people in my hospital in Utah to people anywhere in the world, that is what drove this, the concept of being able to do that. It's totally possible. But over the course of the last few years, I've learned what the challenges are to actually making it happen.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's very powerful. And so, yeah, I would love for you to take us on that journey. I know Spencer and I are both super interested in understanding what challenges you faced, and you had this idea, and to me, that powerful message resonates so strongly, because we're all trying to understand what's happening in our bodies at any given point in time. And I love, that analogy that you're not even analogy, but you're just giving the intelligence. You're providing a light on this thing that I think everybody deeply wants and needs it at a critical time, when they're potentially going through some very scary changes, right? And
I
that's
think
really
the
important.
intelligence analogy, if you think about the Gulf War, when the United States invaded Iraq, it was based on bad intelligence.
Mm.
And we started a war, and thousands of people died. A whole region was disrupted. Not because we didn't have the capability to act on it, but we acted on the wrong thing.
Mm.
Same thing happens every day in the medical system, where physicians with good intent, with all the skills necessary to treat any illness, go in and end up hurting patients because the intelligence they had about that patient was either incorrect or incomplete.
Yeah.
And that it really is this sort of hidden but critical part of our medical care that very few people understand. The surgeons understand it, the medical oncologists understand it, the physicians understand the critical nature of good lab medicine, but most patients don't see it as much. We've gotten a taste of it in this COVID era, the critical element of testing. The thing that's missing is we haven't had good treatments. We can test to help us know how to manage our lives and the spread of the disease, which is important on a societal level. But it's a little bit different than an individual who's making a life-changing decision based on this intelligence. and that is what's important. I'm sorry to keep harping on the importance of pathology, but I think understanding that may help you understand what is the passion and the drive behind this. It really, for me, it's not about, and it never has been about making a business. I had no desire to go into business. My family are great, and gratefully, my family is filled with really good business people. I had no desire to go into the family business. I had no desire to be a businessman. I was maybe the rebel of the family, and decided I wanted to go into medicine. And it's still how I feel. I don't really like the business elements, but I have learned how important understanding business is, and how I can't just drive this with raw passion and my desire to change the world. You can't do that without a good business model and without understanding how this fits into a into a market, into the ecosystem, the market ecosystem of medicine, which I guess that's really a big part of this odyssey, is my learning to appreciate that and harness the things that do drive change to try to achieve and drive change in the field.
Yeah. Well, sorry, go ahead, Spencer.
No, I just love that. I just love the fact that it's, you had a really good life, a good career, and you didn't even want it to go into business, but there was something, the vision you saw, it really made a difference to going down this path. And you probably didn't know how hard it would be. And we wanted to talk about like what has happened, what did you produce, what challenges did you face so far in this journey. But I wonder the one thing that's in your mind though that helped you make the decision to actually leave and start this. What was it? Was it the numbers of people that could be impacted in a positive way? What was in your mind? Like, what was that moment when you made those decisions?
Well, this had started, like I said, long before even before I went to medical school. When I was in college, the internet was brand new, and this concept that we could this idea that we could provide telemedicine, so I remember I grew up in rural southern Utah. I spent my summers working in a town called Loa, Utah, and your listeners can look up and see where that is on the map. It is in a county with about 2,000 people in the whole county. The county's probably the size of the state of Delaware, and there's 2,000 people in the whole county, mostly clustered in little towns of about 200 to 300 people. There's not a doctor. There was not a doctor in the whole county, and in a remote area like that, when the internet came alive, this concept that you could actually have a doctor talking to a patient and looking at a patient's results from 100 miles away was really exciting to me. And I actually wrote my medical school entrance essay about my desire to develop telemedicine. So this was a deeply rooted desire to try to provide the highest quality care to people living in remote places. This didn't start 7 years ago. This started 25 years ago. And but the technology that enabled it was coming to fruition, around 2012. The cloud was becoming, the infrastructure and the cost of storage and the things that precluded pathology from going digital were starting to be addressed by technological advances. Meanwhile, my confidence as a practicing physician was also increasing. So it was a mixture of this deeply rooted desire, which I've already talked about, with the technology that made it possible, and then the confidence to think I could actually do this. And I don't think somebody does something that drastic without an extreme amount of confidence. Now, looking back, I was completely naive. It was maybe crazy, actually, because I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And so, you know, it's, but if I didn't have that crazy degree of confidence at the time, you wouldn't do it. If you didn't think that, if I didn't really honestly believe that I was going to be wildly successful in a year, I wouldn't have done that. But here we are 7 years later, and we've made a lot of progress, but we still have a long way to go before before you can call this a success.
Yeah. There's a couple interesting themes that I'm seeing that I would love to explore. I think one is, of course, you know, for an audience that I think might find this relevant too, is so you mentioned the idea of timing. Like, is it like just the right time because the technology is all kind of gotten to a point where it was just like all of those three things that you just talked about kind of converged. But I'm also interested in, you know, this idea of you know, you had this specialty, this passion, and this interest, and then on the flip side, there's the business side of things as well, right? I think a lot of people probably deal with that same struggle as well. It's like, how do you go through all of those challenges where you're trying to take that passion and that interest and merge it into the business and become this one person who can look at things in both aspects. And I wonder if maybe what we can do is we can maybe explore that one, but just help us understand your story from, I guess, that vision and the right timing, and you've made this decision up until even right now, you know, kind of taking us through what did you create, what, you know, thinking about Lumea and taking us along that journey.
Yeah. Well, the way it started is the business that I did think that I knew was the practice of pathology. I had my own practice. We were contracted with the hospital, but we ran a business, and I thought that I knew that business. And so this whole thing began with a business model that we would just do what we're doing today, but instead of doing it, instead of looking into a microscope, we would just use the same tools, everything exactly the same, except we would do it on a computer screen. And we thought, let's put a digital imaging system, a slide scanner, into a market that's really expensive for pathology. And in that instance, it was Southern California. The cost of a biopsy in Southern California is a lot more, like, you know, 50% higher than the cost of a biopsy in Utah, just because the cost of living is higher. And so our first thought was, let's just provide high quality outsourced pathology to Californians and California insurance companies. We'll do it for cheaper in Utah with this slide scanner. And that was our first. So we we bought a $250,000 slide scanner. It was like taking out another mortgage. And we bought this slide scanner and put it into an independent lab down in Orange County, and started to go door to door to doctors' offices saying, "Hey, send your biopsies to us, and we'll do it. You know, I'm Stanford trained. You're going to get the highest quality, but we can do it for less money, and we have these new tools that'll, you know." And it worked. We went out and we got Southern California doctors to send their specimens to us, and we worked out we proved that we could look at the slides digitally and get the same results that we got looking at glass in a microscope. And we validated that. We were very careful in doing that. And the problem was, we ran into two problems. One, the insurance companies in California didn't really care. We were small potatoes. They didn't care about the fact that we could lower the cost for 100 patients. They were more concerned about covering the cost for millions of patients. That was sort of my first wake-up call. We weren't relevant. We were too small. And the second thing was, it was really inefficient. We'd make the glass slides, we'd scan them there, and it took a lot of time to replicate what we were doing, looking at it on the computer, because when you look at thousands of biopsies every week, you get really fast doing things the way you've always done them in the microscope, and you just you can do it without even thinking about it, without being conscious. Whereas now you're working with a mouse on a computer, it's unfamiliar, and you're trying to teach yourself again how to practice. And after doing it for a few months, we found ourselves just waiting for the glass to get shipped to us. and then we had to ask ourselves, why did we just spend $250,000 for an instrument that we're not even using? And we realized that it's because we're trying to just do things the way we always did them. And the only difference is, instead of looking through oculars, we're looking on a screen. But it sort of opened our minds to, there's nothing like having a $250,000 debt, a piece of equipment sitting there doing nothing, for you to say, how can I make this useful? and so my colleague who went in on this with me, his name's Jared Szymanski. Jared and I, over many lunches, started saying to ourselves, well, it's inefficient because of this and that. And before we knew it, we said, okay, if we want to make this efficient, we need to redesign the entire workflow of taking that wet piece of tissue and all the information about the patient, putting it into a digital putting it into a digital database that is where the image and the information about the patient and the information that the pathologist needs to convey about that is all in the same system, all in the same database. And if we do that, we can actually create new efficiencies and open new opportunities, actually, where we started to envision, well, then you could start to apply artificial intelligence to actually look at all these different data points, not just the image data, but the data about the patient and the data that the pathologist is seeing, and really start to apply computational power. But to do that, the computer needs to be able to access all of that information, and it has to be able to access that information in a standardized way. This problem of having a very expensive scanner that was useless and a need to be able to analyze why is it not working today enabled us to essentially reimagine the entire process of making a slide and making a diagnosis, and how and so we created what is now Lumea's main product, which is Biopsy Link, which is it's a specimen information system, diagnostic information system, really, that integrates lots of different types of data with that image all into one place. And that concept led me to call an automation engineer. We thought we have to automate a lot of these processes. If we're going to standardize them, let's stop having a human do all these manual processes, and let's see if we can automate them so that we can do it exactly the same way every time. So I have my wife's uncle, Mark Evans, is a very gifted automation engineer, and he was a professor down the road at BYU. I called him and said, "Hey, I've got this idea. We'd like to automate these processes. Could we talk about it?" And so I went over to his house and told him the idea, and we started working kind of nights and weekends on this concept. And you know, within a month or two, and we literally built it. The first renditions of this were built with like cookie sheets and erector sets and digital cameras mounted, and there was another lab technician at Intermountain where I worked, named Derek Mann, who actually built this first rendition that we had designed. And so Mark Evans and I tested this concept of this automated specimen processing system, and then came up with this new business model that if we could produce these slides for less money, I don't want to get into the specifics of the business model because it's a really complicated business that your listeners don't really want to hear about probably. But we realized that there was probably a business here that could and so we actually went down to Southern California to some of the clinics where we had been doing those early biopsies and tested the concept with them. You know, if we were to do this, would you send your specimens there? And they said, absolutely. So based on that, Mark Evans left his day job, and I went and I took out a loan to be able to pay Mark. I continued with my day job for a little while, and then realized, you know, this isn't going to go unless we both are doing this full time. And so I let my practice know that I was going to be leaving, and I left my day job, and it was just the two of us just scrambling as fast as we could. And I think the loan that we took out initially was not very much. You know, we thought that we were going to hit success and hit some profitability really fast. And we contracted with a software engineer. You know, our first decision was, do we want to outsource this to another country, or do we want to, put our eggs into a basket that'll be a little more expensive, hiring a really good software engineer here? That was one of the best things we ever did, was actually choosing to have our team be here, because it turns out that, you know, when I started, I thought that between me and this PhD engineer, that, you know, we could do everything. Turns out that this very creative software engineer, who had already started a couple of his own businesses, and I think he left college to do that, but and never went back. He's just brilliant. His name's Andy Ivy. He had as many, if not more, of the critical ideas than the physician or the engineer, and between the three of us, we created this system, and operated, I think, for a year before we ran out of money completely, and it was not looking good, and that's where a critical, sort of business life-saving relief came from my family. I've been talking a lot. Do you have any questions about this, or I can go on for a long time?
It's great. I mean, so I'm sure, Spencer, you probably have some questions. I just want to ask a quick one, just because you did talk about automation, and you talked about um, yeah, and intelligence, and I'm wondering, do you see a world where artificial intelligence can actually replace what pathologists do, and that it's all like the idea that it's all digitized, and then artificial intelligence is then making faster decisions and more accurate decisions, or is that not
I
possible because there is a
no,
human
no,
thing?
um, it's possible, and the question is at what point are we going to turn that over completely to the machines?
Yeah.
I think you should think about um, artificial intelligence in diagnostic medicine very similarly to how we think about um, autonomous driving vehicles and autonomous flying airplanes, autopilot on airplanes. Um, there's no question that those advances are already helping keep drivers safe, keep passengers on airplanes safe, because humans make mistakes,
Hmm.
and machines, can be very good at constantly being vigilant, and you can utilize the machines to really help keep you safe. Um, you know, I suspect that 10 years from now, we'll be the machine learning, the machines will be good enough that we'll be trusting a machine to drive us around. I truly think that's not that far off. Um, how long will it be before we entrust a machine to make our cancer diagnosis, to base a surgeon's decision on doing some life altering surgery? I just can't imagine uh, completely entrusting a machine to to um, to do that. I think that what will always, at least in my lifetime, I think have a human that is behind that machine. Just like we have a pilot, even though autopilot is doing most of the flying um, today. You don't want to have a plane full of people that doesn't have the good judgment and experience of a pilot there in the cockpit. I think that's true here too. That said, artificial intelligence is going to make our practice safer and more efficient and better, and we're already seeing that. And um, and so that's kind of skipping ahead in this journey, um, but that is a critical element to this transformation, um, because you can't utilize artificial intelligence unless you're digital.
Hmm.
And so, while radiology, which has been digital for a couple of decades, is benefiting from the application of artificial intelligence in radiology, pathology is not yet. And it's because, you know, 99% of the pathology happening today is still happening on glass, and you can't use artificial intelligence if you don't have digital images of those tissues. So, so I'll come back to that maybe a little later in the
Mm.
journey, because the transition to artificial intelligence was critical for us.
Yeah,
Um,
I had the same thought, Josh. Just the question about how is that gonna you see artificial intelligence, automation, scalability, but I like how you describe that. Is it's got to be. I mean, it's a sensitive area, right? And it's super important to get it right. And um,
yeah,
but
it's
yeah,
sensitive to the people that are driving it too, because you can imagine that question strikes fear into many
mm-hmm,
pathologists. So in the moment that you put yourself in the position of a pathologist, if you've spent your 20 15 years of training, and then the last 15 years of your career and you have, 10 or 15 years left, how are you going to respond to somebody saying, actually, a machine can do this better? You can see that it poses a threat. And one of the things that we've recognized is, and one of the challenges that we have is when you're trying to drive change, the career horizon, this kind of change, the career horizon of the pathologist really seems to be correlated with their willingness to change. If you've got 5 years left in your career, the last thing you want to do is completely change the way you've done things for the previous 25 years. Whereas if you're coming out of your training and you've got 25 to 30 year career ahead of you, and you see clearly that artificial intelligence is going to be part of your world, you have a choice, and your choice is, I can either learn about this and learn how to apply it and lead it, or I can hide from it. And one of the mantras in my family is, when change is inevitable, you've got three choices. You can fight it, and you'll probably perish because you'll go out of business because the change is inevitable. You can act conservatively and sort of wait and see, and you might survive. If you jump on the wave soon enough, you might have enough to take you to the end of your career. Or you can lead it, and you have an opportunity to prosper. And this is one of those things. I think the digital transformation, automation, artificial intelligence, I think that is inevitable change that will ultimately drive better care, that will solve a lot of the problems that I was talking about at the beginning, the lack of access to care. If you can digitize slides in sub-Saharan Africa and provide the same artificial intelligence algorithm to those slides, you can provide the same quality of care to those people that we provide to our people in Salt Lake City, and that I think that is inevitable change. And so this is one of those moments where I was at the right point in my career. I was young enough and could see that it was inevitable, and chose, I'd rather lead it than watch somebody else and have my practice be threatened. But the reality is, I was about 15 years younger than everybody else in my practice. And this kind of thinking was very antithetical to my colleagues, who I love and trust and trusted, but we were at just different stages in our careers, and that's one of the reasons I chose to leave, is because there was a gap between the way that I saw the world and the need to adapt and change versus the way they saw the world. And it's not that they were, just stodgy and not able to see it. It's just in their careers and their career horizons, it wasn't likely to happen, and that was true. Most of them are retired now, and yet I still have, yet it's happening now in my career. So it really is interesting that a person's age and career horizon does impact the way they deal with change. That said, I've got pathologists who are in the last 5 years of their career who somehow just maintain that youthful curiosity, and it doesn't slow them down. So I don't want to at all seem like I'm being age biased. I can very much understand if you only have 5 years left in your career, why you wouldn't want to just disrupt everything and change. It just depends, I guess, on your relationship to your career. Most people are going to kind of want to just keep things steady.
That's a fascinating observation, though, and it seems like it isn't that you're only looking at your career though, right? You see something way beyond that.
Yeah, oh,
And
yeah.
maybe these other individuals also are seeing, I mean, they're catching the vision of, I mean, you must be looking at 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. I mean, you're looking way ahead to see what it could, what that world could look like. And what caught my imagination is just the fact that, I mean, this is, there is a huge shortage of pathologists for the entire world, right? I mean, I don't know how many, probably runs into the tens of thousands, or maybe even a bigger number. But
I don't know what the numbers are. I just know that if you go outside of Western Europe and North America, there are relatively few compared to the need.
Yeah, and it catches, it's easy to catch that imagination from an outsider. Just imagine with technology and with the right approach, careful approach, this can, pathologists are always going to be necessary, but with the technology, it allows you to get to the masses, right, and make a dent and a difference. I know that there's still parts of the journey that you probably haven't got to yet, and we'd love to hear that right up until the present day. And we can get the theme of ups and downs, right? I mean, you move forward with $250,000, and then you hit an issue, and wonder whether these things just have to happen that way. I mean, it's kind of fascinating. You said, well, if I'd known it was going to be like this, I possibly might
Wouldn't
not have
had
gone
the
down
courage.
Yeah,
wouldn't have the courage to do it. Yeah.
But maybe that's the way it's meant to be, right?
I think so. I mean, I think you either have to be crazy or a little naive or a little bit of both to jump into something.
Yeah.
And if that underlying passion isn't there, you wouldn't keep going. I mean, if you didn't have something that was just really deeply rooted driving you, that belief, that faith in that, I mean, you wouldn't keep doing it.
Yeah, well, and I get I'm observing the fact that it's not just the vision, the passion, but your family and those around you have played a significant part in believing and encouraging and maybe even removing some of those obstacles for you. But I think that's going to be important to any entrepreneur, anyone that's trying to make a difference. Surrounding yourself with people that really understand what you're trying to do, because I think they maybe got a feeling that this is really possible somehow.
Yeah, I'd love to just talk about that a little bit. So if I'm honest with myself, this business would have failed maybe 3 or 4 times over the course of the last 7 years, were it not for my family who have believed in it enough to step up and put their money in and their heart in. I'm a strong believer and I feel like we've had I've spent a lot of time praying that this thing would go, and we've had multiple times in the last 7 years when just as things were ready to go under, we couldn't make payroll. Miraculous things have happened in terms of, and it hasn't come in like a bag of money showing up. It's come in people who have felt the same passion and for some reason have stepped forward and been willing to help us. We had a man named Bruce Crankshaw who was a prominent, held a prominent position in his community, had stock options in his the company he was working, and he at a critical moment when I was going through difficult times personally in my family, etc., he was willing to, I think at the prompting of my brother, who said, "Hey, might be a good opportunity." He was willing to step away from all of that and came in and literally saved the company, because it was a tough time for me. I couldn't provide the leadership to what was now a team of maybe 10 people, and he came in, made a huge sacrifice, stepped in, and saved things. That kind of thing happened multiple times, and we don't have the time to go into all those different moments. But for me to, I just feel lucky and blessed, I should say, to still be going 7 years into this. At first it was just my own money and my own sheer grit. Now it's the support and resources of many. It's just friends and family right now. I have a college roommate who caught this vision, and he has an investment company, and he stepped up and invested. So right now our investors are really friends and family, and to be able to last 7 years with just friends and family in a field like this, I feel very fortunate. And going back to our Rocky, it's pretty unlikely in a field like this, with the obstacles and resistance to change and the sheer massiveness of what we're trying to do, to be alive 7 years later with just the support of friends and family. And so I feel very blessed and very fortunate. And now that adds to this sort of sense of stewardship and responsibility to see it through, to make sure that it does. And I think everyone recognizes how unlikely it is, and yet people's willingness to trust and put their trust in us as we drive this is humbling and sometimes overwhelming.
Wow. Yeah, I feel very uplifted and motivated by how what you're sharing and the feeling that's coming across. It's been a big journey, and I don't know if this makes sense at this point, but as you talk about where you're going, or up to the present day, how what you've put into place. But I think that things of the past, like people's good decisions and people's innovations from the past, can often play into allowing other people to be successful, right? To in fact inspire and help them innovate as well. And I suspect there are things that have happened in, whether it's your friend or whether it's your family business, that their inspiration of great methodologies or great approaches somehow filters into your vision. They would have never imagined it, but that's how innovation can happen. But can you bring us up, comment on that, or bring us up to date with what fast track the last 2 or 3 years?
Thank you. So we ran this technology. So remember, I started off just wanting to practice digital pathology, and then we ran into this problem that the technology doesn't enable it. We have to rethink the entire process, and we did that and created this company, Lumea, which focused on the technology that enables this, enables digital practice. And there was a lot more to it than just scanning slides. We didn't invent slide scanning. That was, remember, we went out and spent a lot of money on a scanner that it wasn't practical. But in the process of creating that workflow, we ended up partnering with a company in Romania that had invented some really unique ways of preparing slides, and that's a whole nother story that would be a whole different program if we talked about that. But over the course of about 5 years, we created this digital workflow that we envisioned at the beginning, and it really is revolutionary. It reduces the cost of preparing those slides to about 1/6 of what it typically would be, and it reduces the amount of time that I have to spend on making a diagnosis to about 1/3 of what that was. So I can do it for less money. I can do it better because I've employed artificial intelligence for, to make things safer and better, and I can do it more efficiently. And I can do it for anywhere in the world, which is, it really has been gratifying to watch this technology develop. The problem is, as I alluded before, it is very hard to change medical laboratories. It's a conservative culture, and laboratories are built not to change. They're built to keep things stable, to reduce variation. And so implementing any small change into a medical laboratory is incredibly difficult, let alone asking them to completely start over and transform their whole process. And we found that it was almost impossible for us to get people to change. We had very little adoption of this revolutionary technology. Everybody said, wow, that is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. I wish we could adopt it, but oh, we just can't. It's too hard. And that's a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of resources to create something revolutionary just to see it fail. And so we started asking ourselves, how can we utilize this? And we recognized that it was more than just about being able to do things the way we do them today, but that we could now harness this ability to provide care anywhere, and to create a new business model. And the business model is one, I think a simple way to describe it is sort of a hub and spoke model. Rather than trying to get every hospital to change their laboratories, which is a really hard sale, we already learned. What if we were to create a central hub that was a nonprofit that could actually produce the digital images for everyone and then just distribute them back? That enables them to not have to change their lab. They just shut their lab down and they get all the benefit that they always had. But now it's all just being done remotely, digitally, and their local pathologist can sign them out. That model sparked something in my mind that was familiar. I grew up in a family that sells insurance, the Leavitt Group Enterprises. It's a large. My father started it. My father was a school teacher that needed to be able to supplement his income, and he started selling insurance in the 1950s in Cedar City, Utah. Over the course of 30 or 40 years, he created a unique business model that enabled small independent insurance agencies in all the small towns in southern Utah to band together and in some ways share resources. They share the billing, they share the collections, they share the accounting, they share a lot of the marketing budget, etc. And they could act cooperatively like they were a large insurance brokerage, and yet each one was able to maintain a large percentage of ownership. That business model that my father developed in the insurance industry, it turns out, applies beautifully in the practice of pathology. And a lot of the same market forces are at play, surprisingly. The insurance industry is full of small agencies that in the 90s and early 2000s was starting to consolidate as baby boomers and people that started their businesses like my father in the 1950s were getting close to retirement age. Larger insurance brokerages were gobbling them up and consolidating. And the same thing is happening right now in medicine, where large hospital systems are gobbling up medical practices all around. And people that build those practices are fairly entrepreneurial. And just like those insurance agents that would like to be able to perpetuate their independent agencies to their children or to whoever, and yet would still like to be able to have a cash out at the end of their careers. The same thing is true for pathologists, who are, in generally an aging group of individuals, and they want the same things. And so what we realized is we could apply this Leavitt Group insurance model to build a network of digital pathology practices where we share these resources, we share the accounting, we share the billing, we share the marketing, and we share the digitization costs. And we distribute to all of them. And so I decided I can actually do more to drive digital transformation, leaving the technology company. I still own the technology company. I still, want to see that transform, the way pathology happens. But I realized I can do more to drive that vision outside the company, actually practicing digital pathology and helping others to learn how to practice in this new business model, than I can just staying in the technology company and trying to drive sales, trying to push sales. In essence, we wanted to create a disruptive force. Rather than waiting for pathologists to say it's time to adopt this, everyone's saying, hey, this is the future, and it'll be great when this happens. We decided we're going to be a little more aggressive. We're going to go out and we're going to capture the work. And it goes back to that family mantra, which is you can either lead the change and prosper, or you can fight it and perish. The way to drive change in people that are change averse is to go out and start capturing their business. And then they have a choice. They can either adopt the technology that enables that, or they can watch their business dwindle. So the pathologists who are willing to drive change are joining this network. And so we've had 3 Intermountain pathologists, the ones that, in this former hospital system where I worked, that stepped away from their day jobs to join this. We have multiple pathologists, one in New York, one in Michigan, one in Arkansas, who have all stepped away from their jobs to create these practices and be part of this Pathnet, this network of digital pathology groups. And again, my family stepped up. Now, it's understandable they would understand this and believe in it, because they've run this business for in the insurance realm for 60 years now. And so what we did is, instead of hiring completely new people, we have a very lean team of 3 people that understand the lab medicine business, but then we're tapping into the marketing team and the accounting team and utilizing the same accounting infrastructure of this insurance company, this family insurance company. And they're co-owners in this endeavor. And so they're incented to support it as well. And so we've tied together these very different industries, insurance and medical practice, to create this Pathnet, which is trying to drive the practice of digital pathology. So Lumea, the first company we created, is the technology that enables digital practice. Now we're creating Pathnet, which is helping pathologists to adopt and transition their practices to a digital practice. And so that, again, I could never have dreamed up that business model. That business model evolved. It started off in my family's basement before I was born with my father. My brothers, Mike and Dane and Eric, and Mark have all helped develop and evolve these business models over the course of 60 years. And now I'm coming in and doing something a little bit audacious, which is to say, hey, let's apply this now in the growth of a network of digital pathologists. It's, again, I have to say, I'm so grateful that my family's willing to see that and believe in that vision, because, if you were to tell me before I saw it, if you were to just say to me, hey, why don't you just apply your family's business model to medical practice, I would have said, that's crazy. There's a reason I chose not to go into my family's business. It's a different business. Those are different. It's a different world. I don't think those worlds really belong together. And now that I've, now that I see it, it's, I truly believe that this is going to transform the practice of pathology, and this practice model that we're pioneering. I think others will adopt it. And I think the future of pathology is not going to be to have every hospital having a small lab. It's going to be this hub and spoke, digitization, central digitization centers that then provide those services to many, many different hospitals. And I think that will, I think what we started here is going to be the beginning of a new practice model. And so I hope that's the case. Let's talk again in a few years.
Would you, so that, I mean, I'm very interested in this shift. And I think that it's what's so interesting is like, it's like there are individuals out there that see the future and see the change that and are inspired by it. And this shift of your business model, I think, allows for those people who I think want to venture into the future with you. And I think that's really cool. And would you say that when it came to just to bring it back to Rocky, but when you made that connection of the merging of those two business models, is that kind of like you like the feeling that you had in that moment, was that just like, I see the path to that future, right? Like, was it that clear to you? Is that how it felt? Or
I'm gonna bring it back to Rocky too, and this was
okay, good.
We'll see how this goes, because this is all on the fly. But in the first Rocky, remember, he got beat. He showed the world that he could compete with Apollo Creed, but he ended up getting beat. And in some ways, Lumea, which is the technology company, was just that. We started this amazing company. It is clearly revolutionary. It's way ahead of what large companies like Philips and Google have done. We are way ahead of what those larger companies have done. And yet we're not gaining traction. And so in some ways, I feel like after 5 years, it's like getting punched out by Apollo in the first fight. We've proven ourselves. We've proven that we've got what it takes, but we didn't quite get there. Pathnet feels like we're getting ready for the next fight. Remember, Rocky wins that fight. So we've now it's not just 2 or 3 scrappy guys going at it. We've got 7 years of collect, and now we're 30 people. Lots of software developers who are experienced in this. We have a new chief medical officer that replaced me. That's one of the that ran one of the largest and most well-respected commercial labs in the country. We have a CEO who is John Worthland, who is just absolutely fabulous, just a fabulous team now at Lumea. That is, we still have Mark Evans, who's running the research and development, and some very exciting projects that are happening there. And Dr. Sorin Mushat, who is, again, that's a whole separate program about this absolutely genius Romanian researcher whose technology is merged with ours and completely transformed. It's transformative. And again, that's a whole nother story. Lumea is set to succeed if we can drive the change. Now with Pathnet, we have, now we're ready. It's like those training montages that Spencer and I were talking about when we were excited and punching the laundry bags in the laundry room in Leeds, England. That's kind of how I feel now with my family coming in behind me with Pathnet, and we have these pathologists that are all leaving their day jobs to start this network. It sort of feels like we're going into this second fight ready to succeed. And what does success mean? Well, success means for Pathnet that we that if I can help make these pathologists successful, we'll be successful. That's what the business model is. We align our interests, we work together, and they go out and they sell this digital product, and we support them. And if they are successful, we'll be successful. And if Pathnet is successful, that we will successfully disrupt the market and achieve transformation for Lumea. Success for Pathnet is actually going to mean, on the Lumea side, when I put on my Lumea hat, it's going to mean creating competitors for Pathnet, people that are replicating this model, people that are taking the model that they see us do in Pathnet and trying to compete with us. We're going to go out there and do the best we can to achieve first mover advantage. But my hope is that others see it, they replicate it, and they come out and try to compete with us. That's how you drive a revolution. That's how you drive transformation. And so, I hope that in a couple of years we can have this conversation and look back and say, "Wow, that's what it was." I'm also now experienced enough and have gone through enough that I recognize that we're just really fortunate to be alive and surviving as a company at this point. And were it not for, the blessings that have come from family and friends and people who have stepped in right at the right time, we wouldn't be here. And I expect that we're going to need more of that to be able to succeed. And so I don't want to take too much credit for this, because the reality is I would have failed a long time ago, many times, were it not for these other people that have come in and helped us right at the right moment in the right ways. And so we're going to count on that and hope for that in the future, and hopefully we'll see this thing go.
Yeah. I think we definitely want to follow up with you, in a couple of years and continue to hear about the story. I think maybe I've maybe one last question, Spencer. You may have one as well. But so what is the biggest challenge that you see in the future? Like, I like, is there one thing that you're probably really looking at as like, well, this is something that we're gonna have to figure out?
I got to think on a high level, because when you ask that question, I can think of a million really small problems that your listeners don't want to hear about. But well, I think the biggest challenge is getting people to change. If we're going to transform this field, it's going to require people to be willing to disrupt the way they do things today, to think, to recognize that it's going to be worth the pain to learn how to do things differently. Hopefully Pathnet will show people that it's worth it. But our biggest challenge is just people's aversion to change. And so we're going to try to push that by creating a need for people to change.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Pathnet's role is.
Yeah.
And then I guess if we're successful at that, then Lumea has a lot of work to be able to learn how to support that. It's a problem I hope that we have. I hope that if Pathnet's successful, then Lumea has a huge challenge to now try to support this revolutionary, this wave of people jumping onto the platform. We're really good at research and development and creating technologies. I hope we can be as good at supporting them. The reality is, I think Lumea is going to have to find some strategic partners. I think we're going to have to partner with big healthcare institutions. I think we're going to have to partner with big technology companies, and I think those everyone's interested in that. And I hope that I think the challenge that Lumea is going to have now is going to be to find those partners who can help us to be able to scale this revolution, because we're not positioned from a financial position to be able to support what I think Pathnet is about to do. So that's those are the challenges that those are good challenges though. Those are different challenges than what we had 5 years ago, where we needed to create the technology and then try to sell it to people. Now we're worried about on the Lumea side, can we support it, and how do we get the resources to be able to do that?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well, hey, thanks so much for the chance.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Seriously, we loved listening and feeling the things you must have gone through over this journey. We love the vision and where you're headed. I think what I'm most optimistic about is the fact that you've understood many times over the pattern of adaptability, right? And testing and learning and pivoting and accepting and needing help along the way. And I think that's what the journey will continue. You'll continue to apply those things. Another time, I've got about 50 other questions I'd continue to want to ask, right? It really is fascinating, but we appreciate it. We usually ask for an unexpected fact at the end, but I think we may have covered that with Rocky and in England and Leeds. I don't know. I mean,
that was a fun little analogy that somehow popped up there. So well done.
Yeah.
Who would have known, back then?
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, no, wonderful. Is there anything else, Josh? I think we usually ask if there's people want to get in contact with you or learn more about what you're doing or be a part of even the network, the Path Network.
Yeah, so Lumea.net, Lumea is Lumea.net, and that's how you learn about the technology. And then if you're interested in this practice model, go to pathnetlab.com, PATHNETLAB.com.
That's perfect.
Fantastic.
All right,
so,
thanks
Matt. Again. Yeah, great talking to you.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Swell podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast, sign up to our newsletter at theswellpod.com, and get in on the conversation through all major socials at the Swell Pod. We'll see you next time.